The morning sun cast long shadows across the Kepler station's observation deck as Maya Chen adjusted her headset for the third time. At 22, she was the youngest communications specialist ever assigned to humanity's most remote outpost, stationed at the edge of what the Galactic Council called the restricted zone. Most people saw it as a punishment posting, but Maya had volunteered. She believed in humanity's place among the stars, even when others questioned whether they deserved it. The station hummed with quiet efficiency around her. Commander Harrison was reviewing supply reports in his office, while Dr. Patel worked in the medical bay, cataloging samples from their latest planetary survey. The 12-person crew had been together for 8 months now, and Maya had grown fond of their small family dynamic. She was known as the gentle one, always the first to offer help, the last to lose her temper, and somehow capable of finding humor in their isolation. "Maya, we're getting some unusual readings from Sector 7, called out Lieutenant Torres from the sensor array. "Could you try establishing contact with any ships in the area?" Maya nodded, her fingers dancing across the communication console with practiced ease. She had a gift for languages, speaking 7 human dialects fluently and having picked up basic phrases in 4 alien tongues during her academy training. The Galactic Council had established strict protocols for human-alien interactions, but Maya had always believed that understanding began with communication. As she cycled through emergency frequencies, a crackling voice emerged from the static. The words were harsh, guttural, definitely not human. Maya's heart raced as she recognized the linguistic patterns of the Zephyrian language, one of the more aggressive species in the Council. But something was wrong. The tone wasn't commanding or threatening as she'd expect from military communications. It sounded desperate. "Commander," she called softly, not wanting to alarm the others. "I think we have a situation." Harrison appeared at her shoulder within seconds, his weathered face creasing with concern. The crew had developed an almost supernatural trust in Maya's instincts over the past months. If she sensed something was wrong, they listened. "What is it, Chen?" "Zephyrian distress call, sir." "But they're not supposed to be in this sector." Council regulations specifically prohibit their ships from entering human-monitored space without authorization. The communication crackled again, and Maya's training kicked in. She began recording everything, her fingers automatically initiating the standard first contact protocols even though this wasn't technically first contact. Something told her this recording might be important later. "Can you understand what they're saying?" Maya closed her eyes, focusing on the alien words. Her gift wasn't just in speaking languages, but in understanding the emotion behind them. "They're asking for help, sir. Medical assistance. They keep repeating coordinates and something about young ones in danger." Commander Harrison's expression shifted from concern to conflict. The standing orders were clear: no unauthorized contact with alien vessels, especially Zephyrian ones. The reptilian species had a reputation for aggression and had been involved in several territorial disputes with human colonies. But Maya could hear something in that alien voice that transcended species barriers, genuine fear and desperation. "Sir," Maya said quietly, "they're not military. I don't think this is a warship." "How can you tell?" "The speech patterns, the terminology they're using. Military communications are formal, structured. This is personal, emotional, like a parent calling for help." The bridge fell silent except for the continuing alien distress call. Maya watched her commander wage an internal battle between protocol and conscience. She'd seen that look before, during their first month when they'd had to choose between following strict terraforming guidelines and saving a unique ecosystem on the planet below. Harrison had chosen preservation that day, earning him a reprimand but Maya's eternal respect. "Lieutenant Torres, what do your sensors show?" "Small vessel, sir. Definitely civilian configuration. Life signs are inconsistent, some very weak readings." Maya felt her heart clench. Without thinking, she responded to the alien transmission and carefully pronounced Zephyrian. "This is Kepler Station. We hear your call for help. What is your emergency?" The relief in the alien's voice was unmistakable, even across species lines. Maya found herself leaning forward, her natural empathy overriding her training as the alien explained their situation. A family transport had suffered engine failure while fleeing from some kind of conflict. They had injured children aboard and were running out of life support. "Maya," Commander Harrison's voice held a warning tone. "I know, sir, but they have children, injured children. The words hung in the air like a challenge to everything they'd been taught about alien relations. Maya turned to face her commander, her dark eyes reflecting the same conflict she saw in his face. This was the moment that would define not just their mission, but who they were as humans. If we help them, we're violating direct orders from both Fleet Command and the Galactic Council, Harrison said slowly. If we don't help them, children die, Maya replied, her voice barely above a whisper. The alien transmission continued, growing weaker. Maya realized their communication equipment was probably failing, along with their other systems. Soon they'd lose contact entirely, and a family would die alone in the cold darkness of space. She made a decision that would change everything. I'm telling them we'll help, she announced, her hands already moving across the console. Chen. Wait. But Maya was already speaking in rapid Zephyrian, providing coordinates for an emergency docking procedure, and asking for details about the injuries. She could feel the weight of everyone's stares, but something deep inside told her this was right. This was what being human meant. The aliens' gratitude was overwhelming, even filtered through translation protocols. Maya found herself smiling despite the gravity of their situation. They were about to commit an act that could end their careers, possibly start a diplomatic incident, but they were going to save lives. As the alien vessel appeared on their view screen, limping toward their station on failing engines, Maya realized she was still recording everything. The footage that would later change the course of human-alien relations was capturing this moment. A young woman choosing compassion over protocol, humanity over politics. None of them could have imagined how far that simple act of kindness would ripple through the galaxy. The Zephyrian vessel that docked with Kepler Station looked nothing like the sleek warships Maya had studied in her xenobiology courses. This craft was battered, its hull scarred by what appeared to be weapon burns, and it moved with the desperate grace of something held together by willpower alone. Through the docking bay's reinforced windows, Maya watched as the alien ship's occupants prepared to disembark. Dr. Patel had transformed the medical bay into an emergency treatment center, his usual calm demeanor replaced by focused intensity. I've never treated a Zephyrian before, he admitted to Maya as they waited. Hell, I've never even seen one in person. None of us have, Maya replied, checking her translation device one more time. But medicine is medicine, right? Pain is universal. The airlock hissed open and Maya got her first look at their unexpected guests. The adult Zephyrian was tall, nearly 7 feet, with the distinctive scaled skin and elongated head she'd seen in textbooks. But what struck her wasn't the alien appearance, it was the unmistakable posture of a parent in distress. The being cradled a much smaller figure in its arms, while 2 other young Zephyrians huddled close behind. Please, the adult said in heavily accented standard, abandoning their native tongue. My children. They are hurt. Maya stepped forward, her natural compassion overriding any fear. We're here to help. This is Dr. Patel, our medical officer. Can you tell us what happened? The Zephyrian's name was Kethvar, and their story unfolded in halting sentences as Dr. Patel examined the injured children. They had been fleeing from a conflict zone when their transport was attacked by raiders, not military forces, just opportunistic criminals who saw a civilian family as easy prey. The youngest child, barely more than a hatchling by Zephyrian standards, had been badly injured when part of the ship's hull buckled under weapons fire. Maya found herself translating not just words but emotions. She watched Kethvar's eyes, large, golden, and surprisingly expressive, as they described their desperation, their fear, their overwhelming gratitude. The parental love was identical to what she'd seen in her own mother's eyes when Maya had been hospitalized as a child. The injuries aren't life-threatening, Dr. Patel announced after his examination, but they would have been without medical attention. This little one has internal bleeding that needs immediate surgery. Commander Harrison stood in the doorway, watching the scene unfold with an unreadable expression. Maya knew he was calculating the political ramifications of their actions, but she also saw something else in his face, the same protective instinct that had made him a good leader. As Dr. Patel worked, Maya stayed with the family, using her growing confidence in spoken Zephyrian to keep them informed and calm. She learned that Kethvar was a teacher, not a soldier, and that the 3 children weren't all their offspring. One was a student they'd rescued from the conflict zone. The revelation that this alien had risked their life to save someone else's child resonated deeply with Maya. Why did you help us? Kethvar asked during a quiet moment. their translator rendering the question with surprising subtlety. Maya considered the question carefully. Because it was the right thing to do. Because you asked for help and we could give it. But your species, we were told humans are territorial, aggressive, that you cannot be trusted. The words stung, but Maya understood where they came from. Humanity's entry into the galactic community had been rocky, marked by misunderstandings and a few unfortunate incidents that had shaped alien perceptions. Maybe some of us are, she said honestly, but not all of us. Just like I'm sure not all Zephyrians are the same. Kethvar's head tilted in what Maya was learning to recognize as their equivalent of a nod. This is true. I am a teacher of younglings. I study other species to better educate them about the galaxy. Most of my people think this is unnecessary. What do you teach them about humans? Before today? That humans were to be watched carefully, that they were unpredictable and potentially dangerous. Kethvar's golden eyes focused on Maya. I will have much to reconsider now. The surgery was successful, and over the next few hours, Maya found herself in the unprecedented position of hosting the first informal cultural exchange between humans and Zephyrians. The children, once they were stable, proved to be incredibly curious about their human rescuers. Through Maya's translation, they peppered the crew with questions about everything from human physiology to their food preferences. Lieutenant Torres, initially nervous about the aliens aboard the station, found himself showing the youngest Zephyrian how their sensor array worked. The child's excitement at seeing the star charts was infectious, and soon Torres was explaining human navigation techniques with the enthusiasm of someone sharing a favorite hobby. Dr. Patel discovered that Zephyrian medicine had developed along completely different lines than human healing arts, leading to a fascinating exchange of knowledge that would later prove invaluable to both species. Even Commander Harrison found himself drawn into conversations about leadership and responsibility that transcended species barriers. But it was Maya who formed the strongest connection with their guests. Her gift for communication went beyond mere translation. She seemed to understand the emotional context behind every word, every gesture. Kethvar began teaching her more complex Zephyrian concepts, while Maya shared human perspectives on compassion, curiosity, and the belief that intelligence created an obligation to help others. As the alien family's ship was repaired by the station's engineering team, Maya realized something profound was happening. The fear and suspicion that had defined human-Zephyrian relations were dissolving in the face of simple, honest interaction. These weren't the aggressive, militaristic beings described in official briefings. They were parents, teachers, children with the same hopes and fears that drove humanity. I must ask you something, Kethvar said as they prepared to depart. This recording device that has been documenting our time here, what will happen to that information? Maya glanced at the small camera she'd almost forgotten about, the one that had been automatically recording since the first distress call. The footage contained everything: their violation of protocol, the successful first aid, the cultural exchange, the moment when barriers broke down and two species simply talked to each other as equals. I don't know, she admitted. Probably a court-martial for all of us. Then you sacrificed much to help strangers. We did what any decent people would do. Kethvar was quiet for a long moment. Would it surprise you to know that my government sent me to scout your defenses? That this accident was supposed to give me information about human weaknesses? Maya felt her blood chill, but Kethvar continued before she could respond. I will tell them that humans are not what we believed. I will tell them about the young female who chose to save children rather than follow orders. I will tell them that perhaps we have been wrong about your species. As the Zephyrian ship departed, Maya watched from the observation deck, still processing everything that had happened. In her hands, she held the recording device containing footage that documented not just their rule-breaking, but the first genuine moment of understanding between their species. She had no idea that within days, that footage would be transmitted across the galaxy, changing everything. The transmission from Fleet Command arrived exactly 72 hours after the Zephyrian ship departed. Maya watched Commander Harrison's face grow increasingly grim as he read the encrypted message, and she knew their brief moment of triumph was about to end. Pack your personal effects, Harrison announced to the assembled crew. We're being recalled immediately. A tribunal ship will arrive in 6 hours to escort us back to Earth. The words hit Maya like a physical blow. She'd known this was coming, had prepared herself for court-martial proceedings and probable expulsion from the service. But hearing it made official felt devastating. Around her, the crew absorbed the news with varying degrees of resignation and anger. "What about the station?" Dr. Patel asked, being decommissioned pending investigation. "Apparently, our gross violation of established protocols has compromised the entire mission." Lieutenant Torres slammed his hand against a console. "Those were children, for crying out loud. What were we supposed to do? Let them die to preserve some bureaucrat's idea of proper procedure?" According to Admiral Morrison's message, yes. That's exactly what we were supposed to do. Maya felt the weight of everyone's sacrifice settling on her shoulders. These people, good people who had followed her lead in that moment of crisis, were now paying the price for her decision. But as she looked around at her crewmates, she saw something unexpected in their faces. Not regret, but quiet pride. "I'd do it again," she said softly. "So would I," Dr. Patel added immediately. Without hesitation, Torres agreed. One by one, every member of the crew voiced their support for what they'd done. Commander Harrison nodded slowly, his weathered features softening with something that might have been relief. "Good. Because I have a feeling this isn't over yet." The tribunal ship Justification arrived precisely on schedule, its imposing bulk dwarfing their small station. Maya gathered her few belongings and secured the recording device she'd kept running throughout the alien encounter. If she was going down for this, at least there would be a complete record of what actually happened. The transfer to the tribunal ship was conducted with military efficiency. Maya found herself in a small but comfortable cabin, technically under arrest but treated more like a passenger than a prisoner. Through her viewport, she watched Kepler Station shrink to a distant point of light, taking with it the best assignment of her career. Admiral Morrison was a stern woman in her 60s, who had built her reputation on rigid adherence to protocol. She reviewed the charges against them with the cold precision of someone reading a grocery list. Unauthorized contact with alien vessels, violation of quarantine procedures, breach of first contact protocols, and conduct prejudicial to interspecies relations. "Do you understand the gravity of these charges, Specialist Chen?" Morrison asked during Maya's individual hearing. "Yes, ma'am. Your actions have potentially compromised decades of careful diplomatic work. The Galactic Council operates on strict principles of non-interference, and your violation of those principles could have far-reaching consequences." Maya straightened in her chair. "With respect, Admiral, children were dying. Children of a species that has been officially classified as potentially hostile to human interests. The classification was wrong." The words came out more forcefully than Maya intended. But she pressed on. "I interacted with them for hours. I saw their family bonds, their compassion, their curiosity. They're not our enemies. They're just afraid of us because we've never tried to understand each other." Admiral Morrison's expression didn't change. "Your personal observations are irrelevant to the larger strategic picture, Specialist. You are not qualified to make judgments about alien species relations. Then who is? The politicians who've never met an alien? The military strategists who see every species as a potential threat?" Maya felt her composure slipping but couldn't stop herself. "I spoke with them, Admiral. I saw their children playing the same games human children play. I watched a parent sacrifice everything to save someone else's child. If that doesn't qualify me to have an opinion, what does?" The hearing room fell silent. Maya realized she had probably just sealed her fate with that outburst, but she found she didn't care. Some things were more important than her career. "You will have time to reconsider your position during the journey to Earth," Morrison said finally. "I suggest you use it wisely." But Maya's position would soon become irrelevant compared to larger events unfolding across the galaxy. While she sat in her cabin reviewing her actions and preparing for disgrace, Kethvar was addressing the Zephyrian High Council with a report that challenged everything their government believed about humans. The teacher had returned home to find their people preparing for what many considered an inevitable conflict with the expanding human territories. Fear and mistrust had been building for months, fueled by incidents and misunderstandings on both sides. The military faction was pushing for preemptive strikes against human outposts before humanity could become a more serious threat. But Kethvar's testimony changed the tone of those discussions. They spoke of the young human female who had violated her own people's laws to save Zephyrian children. They described a species capable of compassion that transcended tribal loyalty, of individuals willing to sacrifice their careers for the welfare of strangers. They are not what we believed, Kethvar told the assembled council. Their capacity for empathy may actually exceed our own. The recording Maya had made became central evidence in both proceedings. While Admiral Morrison saw it as documentation of serious protocol violations, the Zephyrian Council viewed it as proof that humanity might be approached as potential allies, rather than inevitable enemies. Unknown to Maya, copies of her footage were already spreading through unofficial channels in both governments, leaked by sympathizers who believed the truth needed to be seen. The recording was being viewed by politicians, military leaders, and ordinary citizens across multiple worlds. The images were powerful. A young woman speaking halting Zephyrian while comforting injured children, crew members working together to save alien lives, and most importantly, the moment when barriers broke down and two species simply treated each other with kindness and respect. Public opinion began shifting in ways that surprised everyone. Human citizens, seeing their own values reflected in Maya's actions, started questioning why first contact protocols prevented basic humanitarian aid. Zephyrian civilians watching the footage of humans caring for their children began asking their leaders if war was really necessary. Maya remained unaware of these larger currents as the justification continued its journey toward Earth. She spent her time writing detailed reports about the encounter, documenting everything she'd learned about Zephyrian culture and psychology. If her career was over, at least her observations might help future diplomats avoid the mistakes that had led to current tensions. It was Commander Harrison who brought her the news that would change everything. "Maya, you need to see this," he said, entering her cabin with a portable viewer in his hands. "What is it?" "A message from Earth. Apparently your little recording has gone viral across half the galaxy." Maya stared at the viewer in confusion. "What do you mean viral?" "I mean representatives from both human and Zephyrian governments are requesting emergency sessions to discuss what they're calling the Kepler Station incident. I mean civilian populations on both sides are demanding their leaders explain why a simple act of mercy is being treated as a crime." "I mean, Maya, that footage you recorded is being called the most important interspecies communication document in galactic history." The weight of those words settled over Maya like a warm blanket. Her simple decision to help a family in distress had somehow sparked a conversation that might reshape the galaxy's future. But the most surprising revelation was yet to come. The emergency session of the Galactic Council convened in unprecedented circumstances. For the first time in the organization's history, a single recording had prompted representatives from 12 different species to demand immediate hearings about interspecies relations protocols. Maya's footage wasn't just being discussed. It was being broadcast across the galaxy as evidence that current policies might be fundamentally flawed. Maya herself remained aboard the Justification, now less a prisoner than an unwilling celebrity whose actions had sparked the largest diplomatic crisis in recent memory. She watched the proceedings through encrypted feeds, still struggling to understand how her simple decision to help a family had escalated into a galactic debate about the nature of civilization itself. The Zephyrian delegation had arrived with an unexpected proposal. Ambassador Vextar, a seasoned diplomat known for his hardline stance against human expansion, stood before the assembled council with what could only be described as humility in his posture. "Esteemed colleagues," he began, his words translated instantly for the diverse audience, "we come before you today to acknowledge a fundamental error in our understanding of human nature." The chamber erupted in surprised murmurs. The Zephyrians admitting error was unprecedented, but Vextar continued with the measured pace of someone who had wrestled with difficult truths. "The evidence presented by the Kepler Station recording forces us to reconsider our assumptions about human motivations and values. We have observed an individual of their species violating her own government's laws to preserve the lives of our young. This action demonstrates a moral framework that extends beyond tribal loyalty to encompass universal principles of compassion." Maya, watching from her cabin, felt tears threatening at the formal recognition of what had simply felt like the right thing to do. But Vextar wasn't finished. More significantly, we have learned that this individual's actions were supported by her entire crew, despite the personal cost to their careers. This suggests that such compassion is not an aberration within human culture, but a representative example of their core values. The human delegation, led by Secretary of Interspecies Affairs Janet Walsh, struggled to maintain diplomatic composure while internally panicking about the political implications. Maya's actions had created an impossible situation. Condemning her would seem to reject the very compassion the Zephyrians were praising, but absolving her would undermine the entire structure of first contact protocols. While we appreciate the Zephyrian delegation's perspective, Walsh said carefully, we must emphasize that Specialist Chen's actions, however well-intentioned, violated established procedures designed to prevent misunderstandings and conflicts between our species. It was Representative Cathara of the Centauri Collective who posed the question that cut to the heart of the matter. Are we to understand that human protocols prohibit saving the lives of alien children? The question hung in the chamber's artificial atmosphere like an accusation. Maya, watching the proceedings, realized she was witnessing the moment when bureaucratic procedure collided with moral reality, and procedure was losing. Our protocols, Walsh replied slowly, are designed to prevent situations that could lead to larger conflicts. Individual acts of kindness, while admirable, must be weighed against the potential for misunderstanding and escalation. And yet, Vextar interjected, it was precisely this individual act of kindness that has led us to reconsider our hostile stance toward humanity. Had Specialist Chen followed your protocols and allowed our young to perish, we would likely be discussing military preparations rather than diplomatic opportunities. The revelation sent shockwaves through the chamber. Maya sat forward in her chair, suddenly understanding the true scope of what had been at stake. The Zephyrians had been preparing for war, and her decision to help a family had potentially prevented a conflict that could have cost millions of lives. But the most dramatic moment came when the Zephyrian delegation presented their formal proposal. A complete restructuring of first contact protocols to prioritize humanitarian aid over bureaucratic procedure, with Maya Chen as the proposed director of a new interspecies humanitarian initiative. The proposal was radical, suggesting that selected individuals from various species be trained and authorized to provide emergency assistance across species lines without waiting for diplomatic authorization. It was, in essence, an institutionalization of the compassion Maya had shown during the Kepler Station incident. Admiral Morrison, monitoring the proceedings from the justification, felt the political ground shifting beneath her feet. The charges against Maya were becoming increasingly difficult to maintain in the face of galactic praise for her actions. More troubling, her own government was beginning to view the situation as an unexpected diplomatic opportunity rather than a crisis to be contained. This is unprecedented, Morrison confided to Commander Harrison during one of their strategy sessions. The Council is essentially proposing to restructure interspecies relations based on the actions of one communications specialist. With respect, Admiral, Harrison replied, maybe it's about time. Maya showed more diplomatic skill in 12 hours than our formal ambassadors have managed in decades. The breakthrough came when Cathara presented analysis from the Centauri archives, demonstrating that similar acts of interspecies compassion had historically led to lasting peace agreements, while rigid adherence to protocol had often escalated minor incidents into major conflicts. The evidence suggests, Cathara announced, that empathy is a more reliable foundation for peaceful relations than procedure. The Kepler Station incident provides a template for how individual compassion can overcome institutional barriers to understanding. Maya watched in amazement as representatives from species that had barely acknowledged each other's existence began discussing joint humanitarian missions and cultural exchange programs. Her simple decision to answer a distress call had somehow opened channels of communication that formal diplomacy had failed to establish. The Altarian delegate, whose species had maintained strict isolation for centuries, stood to address the chamber. We have observed these proceedings with great interest, they announced in their characteristically formal manner. The human female's actions demonstrate a principle we believed unique to our own culture, that the preservation of young life transcends all other considerations. Perhaps it is time to reconsider our isolation. The implications were staggering. Maya's act of compassion was triggering a cascade of diplomatic breakthroughs that could reshape the galactic political landscape. Species that had viewed each other with suspicion were suddenly finding common ground in the simple principle that helping others, regardless of their origin, was a universal moral imperative. But even as these larger events unfolded, Maya remained focused on the personal dimension of what had happened. Somewhere in the galaxy, 3 young Zephyrians were alive and healthy because she had chosen to answer their parents' call for help. That, more than any diplomatic revolution, justified the choices she had made. What she didn't yet know was that those same 3 children had become the most famous young beings in the galaxy. Their story of rescue by kind humans spreading through every species' communication networks. They had become living symbols of the possibility for interspecies cooperation, and their family had requested permission to testify on Maya's behalf at what was shaping up to be the most important trial in galactic history. The girl who had simply tried to help a family in distress was about to discover that sometimes individual acts of kindness can indeed change the universe. The trial of Maya Chen had transformed from a military court-martial into something resembling a galactic referendum on the nature of moral responsibility. The venue had been moved to Luna Station, the largest neutral facility in human space, to accommodate representatives from 17 different species who had requested observer status. Maya found herself at the center of a media storm that she neither understood nor wanted. "I just helped some children," she told her assigned counsel, Lieutenant Commander Sarah Martinez, during one of their preparation sessions. How did this become about restructuring galactic civilization? Martinez, a veteran of complex military legal proceedings, had never encountered anything remotely similar to Maya's case. "Because you did something that forced everyone to examine their assumptions about right and wrong. The footage you recorded showed 17 different species that compassion doesn't require shared biology or culture. It just requires recognizing suffering and choosing to act." The prosecution's case, led by Colonel James Rector, focused on the dangerous precedent Maya's actions might set. In his opening statement, he painted a picture of well-intentioned chaos. Junior officers making unauthorized contact with alien species, diplomatic protocols crumbling under the weight of individual conscience, and the carefully constructed framework of interspecies relations dissolving into emotional decision-making. Specialist Chen's actions, however admirable in their intent, represent a fundamental threat to the ordered process of interspecies relations, Rector argued before the Mixed Human-Alien Tribunal. "If we allow individual officers to override established protocols based on their personal moral judgments, we create a system where emotion trumps expertise, where good intentions justify diplomatic disasters." It was a compelling argument, one that resonated with many in the military and diplomatic establishments who understood the delicate balance required to prevent interspecies conflicts. Maya listened to the prosecution's case with growing despair, realizing how easily her actions could be portrayed as reckless and dangerous. But the defense had advantages the prosecution couldn't anticipate. Martinez had built her case around 3 key witnesses: Kethvar, the rescued parent, Ambassador Vextar representing the Zephyrian government, and Dr. Elena Vasquez, a xenopsychologist who had spent decades studying the emotional foundations of interspecies communication. Kethvar's testimony, delivered through advanced translation equipment that preserved the emotional nuances of their native language, proved devastating to the prosecution's case. They described the moment when Maya first responded to their distress call, the mixture of surprise and hope in realizing that someone was willing to help despite the obvious risks. The human Maya showed no hesitation, Kethvar testified. When she understood that young lives were in danger, she acted with the speed and determination of a parent protecting their own offspring. This was not the behavior of someone seeking diplomatic advantage or military intelligence. This was pure compassion transcending species barriers. The prosecution attempted to discredit Kethvar's testimony by suggesting they might have been part of a Zephyrian intelligence operation. But this line of attack backfired spectacularly when Ambassador Vexatar took the stand. "Honored Tribunal," Vexatar declared, "I must address the implication that Kethvar was acting as an agent of our government. This suggestion is not only false but insulting to the genuine suffering they endured and the authentic gratitude they feel toward their human rescuers." The ambassador's testimony revealed the true scope of what Maya's actions had prevented. The Zephyrian military had been advocating for preemptive strikes against human outposts, convinced that humanity's expansion posed an existential threat to their territory. The footage from Kepler Station had single-handedly shifted that debate by demonstrating humanity's capacity for selfless action. Specialist Chen's decision to violate her own protocols in order to save our young has prevented a conflict that our military analysts predicted could have cost millions of lives on both sides, Vextar testified. From a strategic perspective alone, her actions represent the most successful diplomatic initiative in recent galactic history. Dr. Vasquez's testimony provided the scientific framework that tied everything together. Her research into xenopsychology had identified compassion as one of the few truly universal emotional responses among intelligent species, but she had also documented how institutional protocols often created barriers that prevented compassionate responses from manifesting. What we see in the Kepler Station incident, Dr. Vasquez explained, is a perfect example of how individual empathy can overcome institutional inertia. Specialist Chen's ability to recognize distress, process the moral implications, and act decisively represents the highest form of interspecies communication, one that bypasses cultural and linguistic barriers to address fundamental needs. The trial's turning point came when the tribunal was shown enhanced footage from Maya's recording, processed through advanced xenopsychological analysis software. The enhanced version highlighted subtle emotional cues in both human and Zephyrian body language, demonstrating the genuine nature of the interactions and the authentic emotional responses from all participants. Maya watched herself on the screen, seeing her own actions as if for the first time. The young woman in the footage moved with natural confidence, translating not just words but emotional contexts, building bridges between species through simple acts of kindness and understanding. It was strange seeing herself portrayed as some kind of diplomatic pioneer when she had simply been trying to help. But the most powerful moment came when the 3 Zephyrian children, now fully recovered, appeared via holographic link to testify about their experience. Their youth made translation challenging, but their emotional sincerity transcended language barriers. The youngest, still small enough to be held by Kethfar during the testimony, had drawn pictures of their time on Kepler Station. The crude drawings showed human and Zephyrian figures standing together, with the unmistakable representation of Maya identified by her communication headset. The child had labeled the drawing in broken standard, "Nice humans helped us." These children will grow up knowing that in their moment of greatest need, strangers chose to help them despite personal risk, Dr. Vasquez observed during her final testimony. That knowledge will shape their understanding of what's possible between species. This is how lasting peace is built, not through treaties and protocols, but through individual acts of compassion that create emotional connections across species lines. The prosecution's closing argument acknowledged the positive outcomes of Maya's actions while maintaining that the ends didn't justify the means. Colonel Rector made his final appeal to the tribunal's sense of institutional order, warning that exonerating Maya would signal that personal conscience could override military discipline and diplomatic procedure. But Martinez's closing argument focused on the broader implications of condemning compassion. "We are not merely judging Specialist Chen's actions," she told the tribunal. "We are deciding what kind of species humanity wants to be as we take our place in the galactic community. Do we want to be known for our rigid adherence to procedure, or for our willingness to help others in need?" As the tribunal recessed to consider their verdict, Maya found herself surrounded by an unlikely collection of supporters. Crew members from Kepler Station, alien diplomats who had never met her but admired her actions, and even some former skeptics who had been swayed by the evidence presented during the trial. The galaxy held its breath, waiting for a decision that would determine not just Maya's fate, but the future direction of interspecies relations. In her small quarters on Luna Station, Maya reflected on how a simple response to a distress call had led to this moment. She realized that regardless of the tribunal's decision, something fundamental had already changed. The conversation sparked by her actions had forced multiple species to examine their assumptions about cooperation, compassion, and the possibility of genuine friendship between different forms of intelligent life. The verdict, when it came, would surprise everyone, including Maya herself. The verdict announcement drew representatives from every major species in the galaxy. Maya sat quietly in the defendant's chair, surrounded by her legal team, crew members from Kepler Station, and an unexpected collection of alien observers who had traveled vast distances to witness this moment. The mixed tribunal, composed of human officers and alien representatives, had deliberated for 3 days, and their decision would reshape interspecies law. Tribunal President Admiral Elena Rodriguez, a woman whose career had been built on diplomatic precision, stood to deliver the verdict. The chamber fell silent as she began to speak. Her words simultaneously translated into dozens of languages for the galactic audience. This tribunal has considered not merely the specific charges against Specialist Maya Chen, but the broader implications of individual moral action within the framework of interspecies relations. We have examined evidence, testimony, and expert analysis regarding the events at Kepler Station and their subsequent impact on galactic diplomatic relations. Maya felt her heart pounding as Admiral Rodriguez paused, scanning the diverse audience before continuing. On the charge of unauthorized contact with alien vessels, we find Specialist Chen guilty as charged. The evidence clearly shows that she initiated communication with a Zephyrian vessel without proper authorization, in direct violation of established protocols. Maya's heart sank, but the Admiral wasn't finished. However, this tribunal also finds that the circumstances surrounding this violation were extraordinary and that the defendant's actions demonstrated the highest principles of humanitarian service. The evidence shows that Specialist Chen faced an immediate choice between following protocol and preserving alien lives, and she chose preservation of life. The chamber stirred with murmurs of anticipation. This wasn't the standard guilty verdict anyone had expected. Therefore, while we cannot ignore the technical violation of protocol, this tribunal issues the following ruling. Specialist Maya Chen is guilty of unauthorized contact with alien vessels, for which she is sentenced to immediate promotion to lieutenant junior grade and reassignment to the newly created Interspecies Humanitarian Response Division. The Yain announcement triggered an explosion of surprised voices. Throughout the chamber, Maya stared at the Admiral in shock, unable to process what she'd just heard. A conviction that resulted in promotion and a new assignment? It was unprecedented. Admiral Rodriguez raised her hand for silence. Furthermore, this tribunal recommends that the events at Kepler Station serve as the foundation for a complete review of first contact protocols across all member species. The evidence presented during these proceedings demonstrates that rigid adherence to procedure can sometimes prevent the very outcomes those procedures were designed to achieve. Ambassador Vextar stood and began what could only be described as applause in Zephyrian. Culture, a rhythmic tapping of claws against armor that was quickly picked up by other alien representatives. The sound spread through the chamber as species after species added their own versions of approval, creating a cacophony of celebration that had never before been heard in a military tribunal. Maya felt tears streaming down her face as the implications hit her. Not only had she avoided disgrace, but her actions had been officially validated as a model for future interspecies interactions. The recording that had started as potential evidence of her downfall had become the blueprint for a new approach to galactic diplomacy. Commander Harrison, sitting in the gallery with the rest of the Kepler Station crew, leaned over to Dr. Patel with a smile. "I told you this wasn't over." The formal proceedings concluded with an unprecedented joint statement from the tribunal, calling for the establishment of the Interspecies Humanitarian Response Division, with Lieutenant Maya Chen as its founding director. The new organization would be empowered to provide emergency assistance across species lines without waiting for diplomatic authorization, essentially institutionalizing the compassion Maya had demonstrated. But the real celebration came later, in a reception hall filled with the most diverse gathering in diplomatic history. Maya found herself moving through crowds of beings from across the galaxy, each wanting to express their gratitude for her actions and their hope for what those actions represented. Kethavar approached her with their 3 young charges, all of whom had insisted on attending despite the long journey from Zephyrian space. The youngest, the one whose injuries had been most severe, presented Maya with a small carved figure, a representation of a Zephyrian child and a human adult standing together. They made this themselves, Kethavar explained through their translator. They wanted you to remember that kindness creates bonds that transcend species. Maya knelt to accept the gift, speaking directly to the young Zephyrian in their own language. "Thank you," I will treasure this always." The child's response, translated for the gathering crowd, brought laughter and tears. "Are all humans as nice as you?" "Most of us try to be," Maya replied, realizing as she said it that this was both the hope and the challenge of her new assignment. Dr. Elena Vasquez, the xenopsychologist whose testimony had been crucial to Maya's case, joined the conversation. "You realize what you've accomplished, don't you? You've proven that empathy can be a form of universal communication. Your actions at Kepler Station have fundamentally changed how we think about interspecies contact." "I just helped some kids," Maya said, still struggling with the magnitude of attention her simple actions had generated. "Yes, but you helped them in a way that honored both their dignity and their parents' love. You saw them as individuals worthy of care, not as representatives of a potentially hostile species. That recognition of personhood across species lines, that's the foundation of lasting peace." The evening's most significant moment came when Ambassador Bextar made an unexpected announcement to the assembled gathering. "The Zephyrian Council has authorized me to extend a formal invitation to Lieutenant Chen and her new Humanitarian Response Division to establish a permanent base within Zephyrian space. We wish to learn from her approach to interspecies communication and contribute our resources to this vital mission." The offer was unprecedented, a former adversary actively inviting human presence in their territory based on admiration for one individual's actions. Maya realized she was witnessing the birth of an entirely new form of diplomacy, one based on demonstrated compassion rather than negotiated treaties. Over the following hours, similar offers came from other species represented at the trial. The Altarians, emerging from centuries of isolation, requested assistance in establishing their first interspecies cultural exchange program. The Centauri Collective offered to share their advanced medical technologies with the new Humanitarian Division. Even species that had been neutral in galactic affairs expressed interest in participating in this new form of cooperative engagement. Maya found herself in conversation with beings whose existence she had only read about in textbooks, all of them eager to discuss how compassion could overcome the barriers that had historically divided the galaxy. It was overwhelming and inspiring in equal measure. As the reception wound down, Maya stepped onto a balcony overlooking Luna Station's central plaza. Below, beings from dozens of species mingled freely, their children playing games that transcended biological differences. It was a scene that would have been unimaginable just months before, when rigid protocols kept species separated and suspicious of each other. Commander Harrison joined her on the balcony, carrying 2 cups of coffee. "Having second thoughts about your new assignment?" Maya accepted the coffee gratefully. "Just trying to process everything. 6 months ago, I was a junior communications specialist on a remote station. Now I'm supposed to revolutionize interspecies relations?" "You already did that," Harrison pointed out. "Now you just have to figure out how to do it systematically." Maya looked at the carved figure in her hands, the simple representation of friendship across species lines. "Do you think it's possible? Building this kind of understanding on a galactic scale?" "I think you proved it's possible when you answered that distress call. The rest is just logistics." As Maya prepared for sleep that night in her temporary quarters, she reflected on the journey that had brought her to this moment. A simple decision to help a family in distress had somehow catalyzed a transformation in how the galaxy's species viewed each other and themselves. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new responsibilities, and the daunting task of building an organization dedicated to institutionalizing compassion. But tonight, Maya Chen, the gentle girl from Kepler Station, allowed herself to feel proud of what one person's kindness had accomplished. The universe was about to become a much more caring place. 5 years after the Kepler Station incident, Lieutenant Colonel Maya Chen stood on the observation deck of the Harmony, humanity's first truly interspecies vessel, watching a rescue operation that would have been impossible under the old protocols. Below them, teams of humans, Zephyrians, Altarians, and Centauri worked together to evacuate civilians from a mining station struck by asteroid debris. The Interspecies Humanitarian Response Division had grown beyond anything Maya could have imagined when she first answered that desperate distress call. What began as a single recording of compassion had evolved into a galaxy-spanning organization with bases in 7 different star systems, staffed by volunteers from 23 species. Status report, Commander Torres, Maya requested, watching her former colleague from Kepler Station coordinate the complex multi-species rescue operation. All evacuation pods deployed successfully, Torres replied, his voice carrying the confidence of someone who had become expert in managing interspecies emergencies. The Zephyrian medical teams are handling the injured, while the Altarian engineers are stabilizing the station's superstructure. We should have everyone clear within the hour. Maya nodded, still amazed by how naturally the different species work together when focused on saving lives. The footage from this operation would be broadcast across the galaxy, just as her original recording continued to be, serving as evidence that cooperation between species wasn't just possible, but natural when barriers of fear and suspicion were removed. Dr. Patel joined her at the observation window, now wearing the insignia of the division's chief medical officer. Remember when our biggest challenge was treating a few Zephyrian children with improvised medical equipment? Now look at us, running the largest interspecies medical response network in galactic history. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I'd followed protocols that day, Maya mused. We'd probably be preparing for the third year of the human-Zephyrian War, Patel replied soberly. The intelligence reports from that time period make it clear how close we came to a massive conflict. Maya's communicator chimed with an incoming message from Earth. Secretary Walsh, now head of the Reform Department of Interspecies Relations, appeared in holographic form with her weekly briefing on diplomatic developments. Maya, I have updates from the Galactic Council session. The Chronovian Empire has formally requested membership in the Humanitarian Response Division, bringing our total participating species to 24. More significantly, they're citing the Chen Doctrine as their justification for abandoning their previous isolationist policies. The Chen Doctrine had become shorthand for the principle that individual acts of compassion could transcend political and cultural barriers to create lasting bonds between species. It wasn't something Maya had ever intended to create, but it had emerged organically from the analysis of her actions and their consequences. Any word on the hegemony's response to our latest proposal? Maya asked. Walsh's expression grew more serious. The Deltarian hegemony is still resistant to humanitarian intervention in their territory, but there are signs their position is softening. The younger generation of Deltarians has been heavily influenced by the cultural exchange programs we've established. They're starting to question their government's stance on species separation. It was a familiar pattern Maya had observed repeatedly over the past 5 years. Established governments often resisted the new paradigm of interspecies cooperation, but their citizens, especially young ones, embraced the possibilities demonstrated by successful humanitarian missions. A soft chime indicated another incoming transmission, this one from the Zephyrian homeworld. Kethavar appeared on screen, now wearing the robes of a council member and looking somewhat older but with the same warm expression Maya remembered from their first meeting. Maya, my friend, I hope this message finds you well. I'm contacting you with wonderful news. The 3 children you helped rescue have all been accepted into the Interspecies Academy. They specifically requested assignment to humanitarian response training, citing their experience with the kind human who saved them as their inspiration. Maya felt tears welling in her eyes. Those 3 young Zephyrians, now teenagers, had become symbols of the possibilities created by cross-species compassion. Their decision to dedicate their lives to helping others across species lines represented the ultimate validation of everything the division had accomplished. There's more, Kethvar continued. The youngest one, you remember, the one who was most severely injured, has written a thesis on interspecies communication theory. She argues that empathy is actually a form of universal language that transcends biology. The academic community is calling it groundbreaking research. Dr. Elena Vasquez, now director of xenopsychological research for the division, had arrived on the bridge during the transmission. The child's thesis is already changing how we approach first contact situations. Her insights into emotional recognition across species lines are being incorporated into our training protocols. Maya watched the rescue operation below reaching its conclusion, with the last evacuees being transferred to safety through the coordinated efforts of multiple species. Each successful mission like this one generated more evidence that cooperation was not just possible but more effective than any single species could manage alone. We're receiving a priority transmission from the outer rim, announced Lieutenant Park. the communications officer who had joined the division after graduating from the new Interspecies Communications Academy. It's a distress call. From a previously unknown species, Maya felt the familiar surge of anticipation that always accompanied first contact situations. These moments had become her specialty, that critical first interaction between humanity and a new form of intelligent life, where a single decision could determine the future relationship between species. "Put it on screen," she ordered. The alien appeared in holographic form, clearly distressed and speaking in a language none of them had encountered before. But Maya had learned to read the universal signs of desperation and fear that transcended linguistic barriers. This being needed help, and help was what the Interspecies Humanitarian Response Division provided. "Lieutenant Park, begin linguistic analysis and activate the Universal Translator. Dr. Vasquez, start xenopsychological assessment. Commander Torres, prep a first contact team with medical support." Maya's orders flowed naturally, the result of years of experience and refined protocols. But as the team sprang into action, Maya paused to reflect on how far they'd all come. The frightened young communications specialist who had impulsively answered a distress call 5 years ago had been replaced by a confident leader directing humanity's most important diplomatic missions. Yet the core motivation remained unchanged. When someone called for help, you answered. The new alien's distress call was successfully translated within minutes. Their ship had suffered critical systems failure while fleeing from some kind of natural disaster. They had detected the division's humanitarian broadcasts and were requesting assistance, despite never having encountered any of the represented species before. "This is Lieutenant Colonel Chen of the Interspecies Humanitarian Response Division," Maya said, speaking slowly and clearly for the translators. "We hear your call for help and we are coming to assist you. You are not alone." The relief in the alien's expression was immediate and profound. Maya realized she was once again witnessing that moment when fear transformed into hope, through the simple act of offering assistance. As the Harmony changed course to intercept the alien vessel, Maya stood surrounded by crew members from multiple species, all working together with the casual efficiency that had become the hallmark of the division. The recording devices were running automatically now, documenting another first contact situation for the growing archive of interspecies cooperation. "You know," Dr. Patel said quietly, "that original footage from Kepler Station is still the most viewed recording in galactic history. Billions of beings have watched you make the decision that changed everything." Maya smiled, watching her diverse crew prepare for another rescue mission. "I hope they see that anyone could have made that choice. That's the real message. Compassion isn't unique to any species or individual. It's what connects all intelligent life." The Harmony accelerated toward its rendezvous with the unknown species, carrying teams trained in the protocols Maya's actions had inspired. Somewhere in the galaxy, beings in distress would soon discover that help could come from the most unexpected sources, and that kindness truly was a universal language. The gentle girl from Kepler Station had become something she never expected, the architect of a more compassionate galaxy. But as she watched her teams prepare for their next mission, Maya knew the real architects were the countless individuals across dozens of species who had chosen to embrace the possibility that strangers could become friends through simple acts of kindness. The recording that started, it all continued to play across the galaxy, a permanent reminder that sometimes the most important moments in history begin with someone simply deciding to help.